When the investigation into the cold-blooded murder of Bob and Rose Marinelli's daughter Liz stalled, the Houston couple had no idea where to turn. The case had national attention, the police didn't seem to have any leads, and somewhere out on the streets, their daughter's murderer was running free. Sean, before we get into today's case, I got something I want to say.
Get it off your chest, man.
Esli Netflix et Temashe de Kim.
Excuse me?
Oh, sorry, man. I've been watching Curtis Netflix while I've been on the road. I'm a little mixed up right now.
I'm going to skip asking you why you're watching Kurdish Netflix. I'm actually more curious about how you're able to watch Kurdish Netflix. That's usually not possible.
Oh, that one's a lot easier. So with Proton VPN, they have 20,500 servers in 148 countries. That means you can access local streaming and websites anywhere in the world without worrying about your physical location. Dude, they've got 30 servers in Kurdistan alone.
30 servers in Kurdistan alone is pretty impressive. That sounds serious.
Proton's the obvious choice for anyone who's spending a lot of time online. I mean, whether you're looking for access to borderless streaming, limitless gaming opportunities, or just smart privacy and security, Proton really delivers it all. Guys, this video is sponsored by Proton VPN. If you want to save 70%, just go to the link in our bio. There's a code there. You just copy that and you use that when you're signing on. You'll save 70%. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to True Crime Unsolved. I'm Myles Reef. I'm here as always with my buddy Sean Cahill. This is the place where we tackle the stories that the TV networks won't touch. Unsolved homicides, missing persons cases, stories without an ending.
Yes, and today we have quite a story for you. This is an interesting one. Full disclosure, guys, this interview was actually shot in 2025, quite a while ago, and we've been sort of sitting on it, waiting for the right time to put it out. Now seems like the time, and there's a couple reasons why. The big one is this is connected to the Liz Barraza case, and it's something that her father, Bob Nelly, who recently passed away, really wanted us to do. He wanted us to talk to this person as part of that case, and so we did. They're not an investigator. They're not a family member. Today's interview is with a gentleman named Andy Kahan, and he's a very unique interview for us because what Andy does is he works as a victim's advocate for the Crime Stoppers organization. Viewers of this channel are going to know a lot about Crime Stoppers. They're basically an advocacy group that specialize in working with families of people who have been killed or are missing, and they work to put together rewards programs. You know, when you see like a missing persons poster with $50,000 for any tip leading to the recovery of this person, that's oftentimes a Crime Stoppers thing. That's what they do. They procure money, they organize that stuff, and they run, to my knowledge, it is either one of or may be the nation's biggest anonymous tip line program for crime. Andy specifically works in the Houston branch of this organization. And so we talked to him a lot about Liz Barraza and her case because the Nellies really felt like he was a guardian angel sort of in their corner. They were so lost after Liz was killed and this investigation started to drag on. And of course, Myles, like we've learned on this channel, nobody prepares you for this, right? When somebody is violently murdered that you are, a family member of or a friend or a spouse or whatever, there's no playbook, right? But that's where somebody like Andy comes in to sort of help them guide, help guide these people through the media, the investigation, dealing with grief, all this great stuff. One interesting thing is he actually talked about a case that we didn't know at the time of the interview, but we wound up covering later, right, Myles?
That's right, Sean. I remember when we interviewed him, Andy actually kept talking about the case of Austin Conyu. And Eddie had also been working with Austin's family. And it turned out that we ended up doing outreach to that family, and we covered Austin's case with several interviews. So, it's a small world.
Yeah, it just goes to show how embedded Andy really is, especially in that particular community in Texas, in Houston. Everyone we've spoken to, including Austin's family later on after we shot this interview, had such good things to say about this guy and all the work that he does. So we thought it's probably time that we surface this interview. We've spent a lot of time over the last year. By the way, an anniversary is coming up for us. We'll talk about that maybe in another video. But over the last year, putting up interviews with family, doing really in-depth case breakdowns, interviewing detectives in some occasions. And Andy was something that we were kind of keeping in reserve because it was just a little different for us. But we felt like we don't want to get too much further without letting you guys see this because it really is a fantastic interview. It's going to be kind of funny because you're going to be transported a little bit back in time to when Myles and I had lower resolution cameras and we're doing things a little differently. But the interview itself, I think, holds up fantastically. And it's really thanks to Andy.
So without further ado, let's get into it.
Thanks for joining us today. We are very excited to talk to you. I guess I should set up who you are for our viewers real quick, and then we'll dive in. So Andy was recommended to us by Bob and Rosemary Nelly, who are Liz Barraz's parents. He's been working with them, and he works with a lot of people and has for a long time. And I'll let him tell you more about that in a minute. But basically, I mean, Andy, what would you say your job title is these days? You've done a lot of stuff in this world, but what would you like to be
I guess
credentialed
the
as?
easiest thing to say is Director of Victim Services Crime for Crime Stoppers. It's kind of like an advocate, an ombudsman, a troubleshooter, and trust me, a few other choice words that I'm given to assist victims as they enter what I call the foreign language of learning the criminal justice system.
Right on.
Why would someone need that service? I think, Sean and I might understand that because we've dealt with so many cases in our careers, but for someone who doesn't really understand how the criminal justice system works, could you explain why your job is necessary?
Yeah, I'll give it to you like this. This is the mantra of mine for the last 30 some odd years. Crime victims are the only unwilling participants in the criminal justice system. Everyone else chose their role. Law enforcement, judges, prosecutors, defense attorney, victim advocates, but no one ever said, hey, pick me, pick me. I want to be a victim of a violent crime. So
Yeah.
it's the least you can do, particularly in government and other entities, is to have someone looking out for victims' rights, their well-being, their due process, and trying to make sure the system works for them. And that's kind of what I've prided myself since I took on this role in 1992.
Tell
And
us a little bit about your background, Andy.
well,
Like, well, sorry, Miles, go
but
ahead.
I just wanted to follow up on that real quick, Sean, if that's cool. So I thank you for that answer. I guess the question then is, the assumption would be for someone looking out from the outside in is that that's what prosecutors and cops are for, right? Like they're supposed to be looking out for the people that are victims of crimes. So why is it necessary to have
Well,
a third party to
yeah,
come in
no,
and
it's a good
advocate?
point. They're limited in scope as to what they can do. I have a leash that can go from one end of the country to the other, so I'm able to kind of get through the bureaucracy, the red tape, things of that nature, and then I'm able to connect victims with resources like other groups that might be able to help them. I'm able to tell them exactly what's going on with the case, questions to ask, and just kind of give them the realities. It's like a basic 101, and it's coming from someone who's built a reputation for three some odd decades as a straight shooter that's not going to pull any punches. And I'm not going to tell you answers you might want to hear just to please you.
Right on. So one of the interesting things that we kind of talked about in our little pre-interview call with you is it was your background, right? And you said something that stuck with me, which was kind of about what the role of a victim's advocate sort of looked like when you got there and how that's changed, right? And like how you've been a part of that evolution. So I guess take me back to how you first got involved in this whole world, and let's go through it a little bit.
Well, after I realized that my future as an NBA player at 6'3" and a post up player just wasn't going to happen, and all the scouts said, dude, you have no chance. So I decided I'll go to plan B. So I graduated with a degree in criminal justice. And after I graduated, I actually went to work as a parole officer and a probation officer. So I chased Houston. So it was great because it got me to learn how the system operates, the realities of the system, and how the system is so totally skewered, where victims are basically treated with disinstitutionalized disinterest. They were just considered collateral damage of it all. So I got a bird's eye view of what was going on. I also saw the system fail so many people, and people that were becoming crime victims that should have never ever become victims. And the only reason they did is because the system just miserably failed them. So I kind of was getting very frustrated in what was happening in the criminal justice system. I was of the opinion that if you were on parole and you violated your parole, for example, like being charged with a new offense, and we could prove it, that you should probably go back to prison. But all my recommendations were being overturned because of prison overcrowding. And then I just saw, because of that, I actually had firsthand look at individuals who should have been in prison but weren't, and then they went on and killed people. So I kind of let loose on what was going on in the system, and in turn, they let me loose. And then in the mayor's race in 1991, there was only one issue in Houston, and that was crime. And that's because we were being inundated with people who were serving just a fraction of their sentence being returned back to Houston, who then went on to commit some very headline gleaming crimes. And the mayor had met with several victims organizations. I had started doing volunteer work for them, and I was known as a go-to person for victims of violent crime. And he asked them, hey, if I'm elected, what can I do to help you guys? And they said, hey, we want to have a staff person out of the mayor's office to address victims' rights and public safety. And candidate Bob Lanier looked at them and just went, sure. He was elected. We came up with what the job should entail. I was recommended for it. I was hired in May of 1992. They didn't have a clue what to do with me, nor could they put a manual in front of you and say, read the manual. Right. It wasn't like I could call New York, LA, or Chicago. Hey, how you guys doing this? Right. I was given a very unique opportunity to build something from scratch and mold it. And I was given an incredibly long leash to tackle issues that needed to be tackled. And I had a mayor that wasn't afraid, because I stepped on a lot of toes, and sometimes the toes bite back. And I've been at it ever since.
Andy, what give us some examples, because you mentioned a couple of times in that really eloquent and wonderful answer that you just gave us. You mentioned a couple of times that you had seen over and over again that people had been I don't want to say abused, but had bad experiences with the system. Now, look, I don't want to. I'm not digging at this to try to bash the criminal justice system or law enforcement.
No, I'm just telling you the reality.
That's what I'm looking, because Sean and I work really closely with lots of detectives and prosecutors, and we have great relationships in lots of different jurisdictions. But we all know that whenever anything becomes bigger than a few people, you mentioned red tape, and there's all this stuff. So could you give us some examples of what families of of victims, or people who have been victims themselves of crime, what's some of the stuff that they run into that people like you are able to help with?
Yeah, I'll give you a great example, and it's actually being shown right now on the Oxygen channel. They're doing a series called Unknown Serial Killers, and we were the debut episode. And we had a Houston-based serial killer, probably one of the nation's most prolific serial killers no one ever heard of, by the name of Coral Eugene Watts. Murdered 13 Houston area women, 1981-82. He's credited with over 40 nationally. So he's actually, quote, killed more people than the greats of like Bundy, Gacy, Dahmer, but no one ever heard of him. So Watts had cut a deal. He got 60 years. In return, he led authorities to where he buried some of the bodies. And that pretty much is it. Families thought, yeah, okay, that's done. He'll come up for parole, but you're not going to parole him for obvious reasons. So in 1992, when I came into my position, one of the mothers reached out to me and said, hey, can you check? I think Watts is up for parole. I said, yeah, let me check. I called, and because I know questions to ask that most people don't know, I asked, hey, does Watts have an automatic mandatory release date? We had a law in Texas that was enacted in 1977 and abolished in 1987. But if you committed your crimes during that 10-year window, you were eligible for automatic release as long as you maintained good behavior in prison. So I asked that very innocuous question. Yes, he does. You're kidding. When? 2006. So I called the mother up and I said, Harriet, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but you need to know, since no one knows, parole is the least of your problems. Under Texas law, he will be legally released in 2006. And I'm sorry, no one in the system told you when he cut the deal that that deal didn't mean 60 years. He was going to get out. I mean, they were shocked. No one said anything to them. I did. Now they knew. Now we could go into action mode and, try to do things to find another case on him. So I mean that was just a classic example that people did not know we had an automatic release in the state of Texas.
Wow.
What about a situation where someone hasn't been caught yet? Where you know for you know because really this project that Sean and I are doing is really about unsolved cases, and be that where we have a body and we know someone was murdered but it hasn't been solved, or a missing persons case that just there's
Well,
no
that's kind of where I stepped up in my role in Crime Stoppers, because pretty much that's what Crime Stoppers does is try to get unsolved cases solved. So there are situations in which families don't know how to access Crime Stoppers. How do I get a reward out there? How do I get a flyer? How do I get a press conference? I want attention to the case, and that's kind of where I guide them through what needs to be done and how we work very closely with law enforcement. And so then I try to put them, this is what needs to happen with law enforcement. You need to ask them,
Mhm.
hey, have you guys considered asking Crime Stoppers to put out a reward flyer? And I need that to come from the victim's family. You need to initiate that. And then we take it from there. So it's kind of like, today, this morning, we had a press conference at 10 a.m. Cases of September of 2023. 39-year-old father, 3 stabbed in his own home at 4:30 in the morning by someone who broke in and then took off on a mountain bike. That's really bizarre.
Hmm.
So we offer cash rewards of up to $5,000 on any felony, but the family increased the reward through their own efforts. And so today we did a big announcement stating the reward has been increased to up to $20,000. So we tell families it's a standard $5,000 reward, but if you want to increase it, as long as we have the detectives okay, you can do so.
Wow. And tell us a little bit about how the Crime Stoppers thing works, because I know how it works, but I think most people might not understand just how anonymous and all the steps that are taken to like protect tipsters, right? It's kind of cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So Crime Stoppers in Houston, we're the largest Crime Stoppers in the country. We're the only Crime Stoppers with its own building. And we're the only Crime Stoppers in the country that has a schmuck like me that does what I do. So we're very unique in Houston. We solve cases. So how it works. Now, do you guys ever know how Crime Stoppers began?
Actually, I don't. I'd like to hear it.
It's a really cool short story. I'll tell you. It was in the early 1980s. It was an Albuquerque, New Mexico police officer, and he was frustrated. He couldn't get this case solved, and then he said, I'm taking it to the public." And he did a news segment pleading for the public's help. And guess what? Public help. They called it in. They called in tips, and he went, "Hey, this worked. Let me try it again." And he did, and it worked. That's how this whole Crime Stoppers originated, just because an Albuquerque police officer thought outside the box,
Mm.
and it
Wow.
spread from there. So that's how it began. So the way it works here is we work very closely with law enforcement. As a matter of fact, the 3rd floor of our building is staffed only by law enforcement to vet the tips and to take all the information. So families, particularly in felonies, any crime victim can ask for a Crime Stoppers reward flyer. And then the detective will send us the information and we come up with the reward flyer asking for the public's help on it. And there's 3 ways you can submit tips. You can call our standard number, 713-222-TIPS. You can go online, www.crime-stoppers.org. We even have a mobile app in over 20 languages. All tipsters are anonymous. Okay, so yeah, how do we know it's anonymous? Can you prove it? Things of that nature. So I get people that leave me messages on my office phone, listening to the message and they're telling me, waiting for the, call me back number, right? They don't give it because they think I have a caller ID. We actually did a news story showing the phone ringing in my office, close-ups. There's no caller ID on it. It doesn't happen. We do not ask you any information. So you're given a code when you reach out to Crime Stoppers. This is your code. And then you can check back using the code to see if your tip led to the arrest of the suspect. That's how it works.
And these people do get paid out, right? I mean, that is not like a lottery system that doesn't exist. That code is real. If your tip actually helped, you can call and collect.
Not only can you collect, but sometimes I'll give you, was it 2 to 3 years ago, we gave out the largest reward in Crime Stoppers history, $100,000. And that went to one tipster. A lot of times the tips get the rewards get split between tipsters, depending on the weight of their tips. But one lucky tipster walked away with 100 grand.
Andy, can you explain to the audience what's the parameters for actually collecting the reward? What has to happen?
Your tip has to lead to the arrest, period. That's really it.
Yeah.
The information you gave led law enforcement to make an arrest. You don't have to be convicted, okay? So in other words, you don't have to wait years to go through the system, right?
Right.
Once that person is arrested and charged with that offense, we have what's called a rewards committee, and they're the ones who determine the amount of the reward that will be given to the tipster.
Wow.
So it's great. I mean, it's so pragmatic, and there is so much red tape and so many things that we know so many families have bumped into, and this is such a simple and such a base motivator where someone who actually knows something, but maybe, they're afraid of repercussions or, whatever it is, because people who have knowledge of bad things sometimes, are in with bad people or whatever. It's really brilliant, keeping it anonymous and the whole way you guys have it set up. It's rare to
The
hear
way we look
something
at
that
it,
actually works, sorry, go ahead.
No, the way we look at it is the public is our best eyes and ears out there. They're the ones who have firsthand knowledge. And in most cases, somebody knows something. So we appeal to them, say, hey, step up to the plate, do the right thing, help this family get justice. We don't want to know who you are. And here's another interesting thing. We have actually people that have called in tips that don't want the reward. They just want to do that. So that's kind of interesting as well. Keep the reward, they say. Yeah.
Well, what's kind of cool too is I think, what Myles and I have run into, like exploring a lot of these unsolved cases, is it does feel like a lot of them are something where a person who's very likely alive knows exactly what happened and for some reason isn't coming forward. And so there's fear, I'm sure there. Sometimes maybe they're partially implicated, whatever the case may be. But what's cool about what you guys are doing is you're offering an incentive beyond to just do the right thing, right? Which it kind of used to be like, hey, get this off your chest, do right by this family that wants an answer. You guys are like, we'll give you $25,000 too. So please just give us information, and nobody even has to know that you're the one that gave it. And it's amazing
it's human nature. If you want to offer people, that's people will readily step up. But
it's also outside of law enforcement. So it's like if you're someone who's afraid of going to the police, this is a way to relieve your conscience, whatever. As Sean said, there's a money motivator, but you also don't have to talk to the cops.
Right, because a lot of these people probably are people who have their own issues in that department, right? And are not necessarily excited to go sit in a police station for whatever reason.
Not only that, but you also get implicated in a police report because your name becomes public.
Yep.
We're actually subpoena proof.
Right. So if anyone did a FOIA request or anything, they would get that name. It would be
you will never get our name. We are protected by the courts.
It's great.
Even when it comes out in court, you are not identified as a tipster.
Wow. Well, again, I mean, that jumps, I think, so many people's fear with this, which is crucial, because a lot of people might know things that happen, but getting dragged into it, right, is another deal. And I think too, what you guys are overcoming is the fact that a lot of people assume the police will figure it out without their help, and they don't want to get involved, right? Like, oh, a murder happened. I know who did it in my neighborhood, but it's not my job. These detectives will figure it out. Like, why should I put myself out there? Well, if 2 years goes by and there's some money and you are guaranteed anonymity and you're not talking to a cop, you're calling a tip line, why not? You stand to benefit, and there's
Right.
no,
Yeah, it's kind
no
of like
risk.
the press conference we did today. Someone said, well, why come forward now? It's been 2 years. Basically, it's because they've exhausted all the options. They've tried it. I mean, a lot of times, one of the reasons we tell families that sometimes law enforcement doesn't want to put out a reward flyer, it's because they're close and they don't want to scare anybody off. So
Mm-hmm.
at times, we're called the last resort. We've
Mm.
tried everything. We can't, let's appeal to the public. And that's
Right.
kind of, where we stand in that bastion of, doing the right thing and getting these cases solved. There's a thing that I always say at the end of press conferences, and I always say grief is intensified when justice is lacking. And sadly, right now, justice is lacking for so many of these individuals. So give this family some peace and at least give them some semblance of why and who did this to this family member.
So important. I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand. They're like, well, it's what's done is done. What difference is it going to make? And then you speak to these folks, and it's like, no, they can't rest. It's so important to have answers and to have some closure on these things. You mentioned helping people understand how to navigate like interfacing with the cops and the judicial system. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think, like we talk to so many different families, and like some take really pragmatic approaches, and then some, kind of like scare off the cops because they're why don't you talk? You're the expert, but I think you know where
Yeah.
I'm going.
We have monthly meetings in Crime Stoppers. I serve on the board of parents of murdered children and surviving family members of homicide. We probably in Houston have one of the largest chapters in the country, and most of the time, law enforcement attends the meetings, and it's good for them to hear frustrations from the families, and it's also an opportunity to families, to ask them questions. And there are times where I have to tell families, look, you can't keep calling. Okay, first of all, they're very busy. Understand there's a human component to law enforcement. If you send them an email, more than likely you'll get a response. But returning phone calls is difficult when there's nothing to report on. And basically, then it turns into a long, drawn out. I said, I can tell you that they are working on the case. You just got to give them a little space and latitude. And trust me, there are a lot of times there are things they can't tell you for your own protection. And they don't want things getting out. So even though they seem to be tight-lipped, they're working it. Okay, there's a lot of things that are going on that you will not be aware of until hopefully this case goes to court. I remember one family, it was David and Debbie Schwartz. Their son and his friend came down from University of Texas and did what stupid college kids do during spring break. And they were trying to buy some dope, and they were shot and killed execution style. Suspect fled the country. He was on the run for 21 years.
Wow.
21 years. And finally, after 21 years, they were able to extradite him back from, of all places, Venezuela, which is another story and another.
Right.
We got him from Venezuela. But at the trial, I remember David Schwartz telling me, because the police officers were testifying, he goes, they just blew me away. I had no idea they did all this stuff because they wouldn't tell me. He goes, I was absolutely floored at the amount of investigation and work that they did. But I understand now why I wasn't told certain things.
But that
Yeah.
was 21 years down the line.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. Well,
Right.
there's such a veil, sometimes, and you said it. I mean, it's for a good reason. It makes it really hard for investigators to do their job if everybody knows what they're doing and who they've spoken to and what they've learned. I mean, like that's a nightmare scenario, and that
But if you
applies.
don't know that, sorry, John, but if you don't know that, the frustration that you must feel.
Oh man, can you
And
imagine?
that's where I come in.
Yeah,
I kind of explain, this isn't a TV, and TV's made it tough. I mean, it's made it hard because you watch shows and everything's gift wrapped and neatly done in 1 hour. And reality isn't like that. Most of these cases are puzzles. I mean, a lot of time, it's rare that you have something hand delivered where you have X, X, and it all adds up. A lot of times it's doing circumstantial. It's a giant puzzle and you're putting the pieces together. And then when you put the pieces together, anyone with a sense of logic or brain will recognize that that person was responsible for that. But that takes time.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to prove it so that it'll hold up in court.
Well,
As
the
we all
old
know.
adage of knowing who did it and proving who did it in a court of law it's kind of like academics in the real world.
Right.
They're separate entities.
Right. Right. And that's something that, we see a lot, which is, with these unsolved cases where, you talk to the investigator and it's like, I have a feeling he knows who probably did it, but he can't prove it yet, and he's waiting for that one piece of evidence to come
You're
out.
waiting for that puzzle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a piece of the puzzle. And that's what a homicide case is, a giant puzzle. And you start with all these pieces and you're trying to put them together. Sometimes you can, sometimes it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, thank God you're doing what you do, because I think most people spend their lives not trying to think too hard about homicide cases.
Right.
And so when it happens to somebody in their family and suddenly they're in the middle of this process and this system that they don't understand. And like you said, I think our expectations are unrealistic because of movies and books. And like, we all get presented a different version of like what detectives do and how quickly they solve things. It's got to be really difficult and quite a learning curve.
Real life is not a Law and Order episode.
Right.
And what I tell families is, look, I can't go back and change what happened to you or your family, but we try to make things better to come along, and you've achieved a lasting legacy. In that case, turning a negative and taking it into positive action for social change. That's pretty much what victim advocacy is about, and that's what I hold myself to.
What's the most challenging aspect of what you do?
Frustrations for victims' families, and then courts. Once you get somebody charged, how long it takes to actually either go to trial or get a case disposed, because in a murder case or even a capital murder case, you're looking at a minimum of 2 to 3 years. And so there's a lot of things that are going, the cases get reset, or I've got a new prosecutor again. This is my 5th prosecutor on this case. When will it ever end? It's kind of like, the way I look at it, it's kind of like when you're in school and you're trying to learn a foreign language and you're thrust into this brand new world. And at times it's like a black hole and it just sucks the life out of you.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
And you guys are pretty much all these families have.
We're kind of the bridge, and because I've been doing this for a long time, obviously I think I've got a lot of street cred, and people know that, I tell people, I said, I'm going to give you a straight. You might not like the answer I'm going to give you, but I'm going to give you the answer. I'm not going to try to push it on to someone else or make things nice. I'm going to talk to you straight. And I think most people appreciate that.
Yeah, I think especially in that position, you're in a world of answers that are probably not going to be pleasant, but getting something counts for a lot, right?
No, I deal and meet people under the worst possible scenarios.
Right.
So like today, I met a lot of the family that were part of the family of the young man that was murdered. And I walked in, I said, I'm glad you're all here, but I am so sorry that you're here. And I am sorry we have to meet under these circumstances. But that's reality, and this is where we are right now.
Yeah.
How has it changed you, Andy, doing this for as long as you've been doing it? I mean, I'm sure when you were a little kid, you weren't thinking this was going to be what you did for so many years.
Well, it didn't exist. It's like you
right.
made a job.
But the exposure, right, like to just that level of grief and human heartbreak for so long. I mean, like, I guess, what have you learned and how has it affected you?
One thing people say, hey, when are you going to step down? When are you going to retire? I said, I'll know when I'm going to retire, because that means I no longer have passion for doing what I'm doing. And as long as the fire still burns and I have passion, then I'm going to continue to do what I do. I don't like seeing the wrongs of the criminal. I don't like seeing the criminal justice system not work for who it should work for. And like I said earlier, the unwilling participants and that the victim. And that's kind of what drives me with them. I've met some of the most incredible people. They've become part of my extended family. People that on through the worst scenarios are part of my life these days. And seeing things happen in a positive way for them and making the system work for them, that's a powerful narcotic for me. And so, I'm going to continue to do that. And I don't mind stepping on toes. And I don't mind, when you advocate on behalf of one faction, you will generally infuriate the other faction. And that comes with the territory. So my alter life, I refereed high school basketball for 28 years.
Wow.
And I use the same, and I never missed a call, but that's another story on another day. I use the same analogy refereeing a ball game as I do with this job. I blow the whistle, I make the call, half the crowd agrees, right? The other half disagrees no matter what I call. Therefore, I make the call I think is right. I sell it. I move on. I am not going to please everyone. And if I was, I wouldn't be worth a damn.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
You can't do what you're doing by being neutral. That's
You have to have a lot of intestinal fortitude.
Yeah. That's a really interesting way to put that. And it's true. I mean, you're there to advocate for one specific group of people. And that does necessarily involve, poking, being a pain, showing up, sending emails, whatever, giving advice that's not going to make these people happy. But that's what you have to do to help the people that you're trying to help, right? Because the system is almost designed, and I'm sure it used to be even more so, to sort of not necessarily get bogged down interfacing with victims' families 24/7, right? Like these are systems that are designed to investigate, catch, charge, prosecute. The part where you deal with the human element and the people who are upset, there's a little bit there, but not nearly enough. And I think, everybody on this call probably knows that because we've all met a lot of victims' families and heard how it's gone for them. Sometimes it's good. A lot of times it's a dystopian nightmare trying to figure out how to navigate the bureaucracy and the people and the uncommunicative elements who, might be doing the right thing, but dealing with the family's feelings day to day is not their primary.
When you look at a criminal case,
training.
When someone is being charged, it always says the state versus. It's not Andy Kahn, the victim, right? You're not even part of the equation. The defendant gets a name because he's charged, right? But it's the state. And I tell people, they don't work for you. Understand that. It's the state's case. It's not your case.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. And, they feel for you. They understand. But their job is for the government, not as your private attorney, right? Or your private investigator. You can hire those people, but
correct.
Yeah.
Right. It's not about your personal justice or revenge. It's about someone broke this law and we're punishing them for breaking that law
on behalf of the government.
On behalf of the government. Yeah.
It's a really good distinction, Andy. I think we all forget that from time to time. Like you think, my family member got murdered. Now the cops are helping me. Well, that can happen, but that's not really what's written in the manual, right? It's
right. And the same thing when the prosecutor doesn't work for you.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and they do care. Like we should say, I'm sure we've all worked with these people. They care. It's just that they're not. It's a tough job in that way because they have to sort of separate themselves out in order to
can't get too emotionally vested or you will lose your perception and you will lose control.
Sure. And you have multiple cases going on and, there's so many factors. Andy, you mentioned that you guys actually have law enforcement working with you, but I would imagine that sometimes you have to step on some toes in that world. How do you manage these complex relationships that you have going on?
It's a great question. It's a great question. I think that's come with years of experience, and it just a learning curve that I had to have when I first started. I was like a young buck, and I didn't, so I go back and I look at myself through the years on news footage and I cringe at some of the things that I said, and I don't know how I got away with it or how I'm still here on that. So I think a lot of it's because we developed mutual respect, and they know if I'm reaching out to them that it's serious. I'm not wasting their time or fishing or anything of that way. And so, question, what can we do to make this right? And how do we rectify this perceived problem? So it's kind of like a marriage made in heaven. Sometimes we fight and squabble. Other times it's the greatest thing in the world. So you never know. It's the beauty and the beast of this job is I always say, here's what I got scheduled. What scares me is what I don't know that's going to happen. Yeah. And eventually something always does happen. So kind of like a firefighter, you got to be, there might be a day where you think you have nothing and then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
So you got to be on your toes and you got to be ready.
Right. I would imagine, that, at the end of the day, people in law enforcement appreciate that there's people like you doing what you're doing, because at least you're educating families on the truth and the harsh realities that do exist in that world, and what these guys are up against, the investigators and the prosecutors, and you're teaching valuable skills of how to deal with them in a way where they're not going to push it too hard. Like you even said, like, don't call every day. So just something as simple as that, and explaining why is probably really useful.
There's a lot of mutual respect, and a lot of the law enforcement community that I deal with are appreciative. There's things that I can do and say publicly that they can't, but I can do that. So a lot of times I'm a valve for them. They'll tip me off to things that are glitches in the system, knowing that I can address them much more easily than they can, and I can live to tell about it.
And then you're going public with that, can kind of try and lubricate the gears, I would assume.
Well, I have a lot of mantras just because I've been doing this for a while. So here's another one. Instead of yelling and screaming about the injustice of the system, I would much prefer to find solutions and or remedies.
Right. Yeah.
Anybody can yell and scream, get 15 minutes of airtime. What have you done? So what? So I do a lot of public policy work during the legislative sessions. I've been responsible now for crafting and passing over 25 pieces of legislation to enhance victims' rights and public safety. So if there's a glitch in the system, I'm going to fix it.
Well, that's the right attitude. Yeah, I think it's the classic critic thing, right? It's so easy to just criticize what's not working and then walk away. The hard work comes from figuring out how you can make it work, right? And then doing the work to implement that. So yeah, hats off to you for that. A lot of people don't have the stomach for it. We all want to sit and bitch and moan, but at the end of the day, that doesn't do much.
Nope. Right. Like actually doing something practical is a whole different ball of wax. Could we switch gears and go back to where we should have started, which is probably my fault? I'd love to hear your story, and
when you're talking about my story, you're talking about my journey to where I am here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I do think you got it.
Okay.
You got it. Because I was just fed up with, I was just fed up with what I was seeing.
Yeah.
So before there was a quote term called whistleblower, that was me.
Yeah.
I ended up.
You were a whistleblower before there were whistleblowers.
Yeah, blowing whistles before it was cool.
As I like to say, I ended up on a little-known show called CBS's 48 Hours.
Right.
And I had a 3-page memo that they were stupid enough to put in writing called a quota system. They actually put it in writing how many people had to be released from prison every week, every month, no matter what as long as they were parole eligible.
Wow.
And they put it in writing. And I remember I gave it to a producer of 40, and I was kind of young back then. I didn't kind of green. And I gave it to her, and her eyes lit up like she just hit the slot machine jackpot. She goes, "This is gold." And I went, "Really?"
Yeah. Well, and just to be explicit about what you're talking about, this was in Texas, right?
Yes.
A sort of protocol for letting people out, probably more than the public was aware of, right? Just because of prison.
Nobody knew this was happening.
And
Yeah.
it was based on overcrowding, I would assume.
Correct. Exactly.
Right.
That
So
led
these people
to
that
a prison expansion, and we obviously no longer, have that problem. But nobody knew what was going on.
right.
But I knew because I was in the system.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So these people are back
So-
on the streets much quicker than everybody thinks. And a lot of them are super dangerous people with really serious charges. And then you dig up this piece of paper that, that's pretty explosive. Like, people wouldn't want to hear that, I would think.
No, they were not they were not a bunch of happy campers. When I still have that memo, I have it framed
Oh, that's great.
That's
in my
awesome.
office, and I have it framed confidential. Yeah, right.
Not for long. You know what I wanted to ask you about, Andy? It's another place we probably could have started, but I wanted to talk to you about the Nelly family, Liz Barraza's parents, because we, like I said, we filmed with them. They were so great. They had great things to say about you. And I think they're a really good example of a family that's still looking for answers, right? That you're working with. So
Bob
maybe
is my protege.
there you go. So maybe,
Well, yeah, and Bob's actually doing the work for other people now, right? Like he's helping other
Yes.
families learn how to interface with the cops and stuff.
I mean, when I met Bob and Rosemary again, meeting them under the worst possible scenario with the murder of their daughter, Liz, that was back in 2019, all of us thought this case was going to be solved quickly. We all thought it. So did Dateline. They came down and filmed. They have footage that they can't use because there's no ending. Everyone thought this was going to be solved, and obviously we're going on 6+ years right now. But I saw potential in Bob, and Bob was willing to be a pupil. He was willing to learn. And there's nothing I like better than mentoring crime victims so that they can learn. It's kind of like the old adage, the pupil outdid the teacher. So I worked with Bob. I helped him. I helped him, learn the system, how to navigate him, taught him how to do the media interviews, he screens everything by me still to this day. Should I do this? Should I do this one? Here's what you shouldn't do and all that. So, Bob, was thrust into this whole new world, and he's found a place right now. And obviously they're still desperately trying to seek answers to what happened to their daughter, Liz. I mean, the way I describe what happened when Liz was murdered, it reminded me of watching an old Sopranos episode where they would just drive right up, get out of the car and start shooting, get back in the car and run.
Yeah.
That's kind of what happened with Liz Barraza. You get out of the car while someone's setting up for a garage sale at 6:45 in the morning. Walk over, shoot 4 times, get up and leave. Don't take anything. It
does have that mob hit element, right? And I think
exactly. That was the way I described it when I did an interview with Dateline. Sopranos hit in real life.
Yep.
And I told Bob, I said, I'm with you throughout your entire journey. We will do whatever it takes. And so Bob has, not just concentrated on his own case, but he right now has helped so many families. We actually put together a workshop we did last year for the National Parents of Murdered Children Conference.
Wow.
And Bob was teaching other families, how to raise funds, how to get awareness, how to get publicity, how to do interviews. And I could do that, but it's better from someone like Bob because they're walking in Bob's shoes.
Yeah. And, it sounds like, hearing it from you, but also hearing it from Bob, I think it's helped Bob quite a bit. I think it's given him a purpose that's like, when you don't have answers and there's this void and there's this emptiness in your life, like finding something proactive is critical, right? And this is a perfect thing for somebody like him who's driven to help, sees and understands what other people are going through because he's gone through it himself and is still going through it. And the other way you see this play out sometimes is like people can have their lives destroyed because they don't find something to move towards, right? I've met those people.
Bob epitomizes of taking a negative and turning it into positive.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And he truly epitomizes that role. And you are right. I think it's cathartic for him as well.
It
Yeah.
seems that way. I mean, he talks about it a lot. We've spoken to him a bunch of times, and he's always bringing up the work that you guys are doing.
He's
So,
passionate about it. I mean,
yeah.
it's like something that he's not saying like, oh, I have to be going through this and I'm reluctantly learning all this stuff. Like, I'm sure Bob would prefer never to have entered this world,
Hmm.
obviously, but he has a passion for it now because I think he cares deeply about other people, which is really remarkable. Not everybody goes that route,
The
people
family
get,
that we did the press conference with today, they were prodigies of Bob. Bob taught them how to raise the reward.
Hmm.
wow.
Bob taught them how to get in touch with the media, how to do news stories. And Bob said, "You need to talk to Andy Kahan." and
Yeah.
and they did. So
How
that's
how
Bob.
do how do families find you guys? Does someone reach out to them, or do they come to you, or is it a
They come
mix?
to us.
Okay.
We're very, I'm not putting us on a pedestal, but in the greater Houston area, we're pretty much a known commodity. We do an awful lot of news, and so we're visible. So and so also law enforcement knows. So if I try to reach out to everyone myself, there's no way I could do that. Period. It just wouldn't work. So it might sound a little selfish, but you got to come to us.
Right. And are there enough of are there enough Crime Stopper organizations around the country where there's an option for somebody no matter where they are to get this kind
Nope.
of help?
We're the only game in this country that does what we do. I
Wow.
hope that we're setting a precedent. I hope other Crime Stoppers see what we're doing and kind of adopt stuff like that.
Mm,
But keep in mind, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. So the question is, how do you fund? We're very fortunate with our CEO, Rania Mancarius, who's brilliant at what she does, and she knows how to tap in to funds. We have a big gala twice a year that we do and raise funds. So we know how to get the funding to have positions like mine.
Yeah.
And we also have the vision to step outside the box. 99% of Crime Stoppers, what they do is tips, and that's great. That's what the original purpose was. We decided to take it a little step further and incorporate victim services, crime prevention, school safety, and everything else.
That's
are
fantastic.
there other victims advocacy organizations in other states that do that kind of work where they teach people how to talk to the cops and that offer some mental health stuff, like anything like that?
I'm sure they do. Yeah. I mean, obviously I work with a lot of the local victim services groups here. We meet every quarter. So, hear what's going on with everybody. So we try to work together, and none of us can do what we do without each other. If I have families that involved in domestic violence or sexual assault, I know who to send them to.
Got it.
So
Got it. So those groups. So how usually how does someone know that these groups exist? Like okay, say you're a female, you're a victim of domestic violence. You call the cops. They take your husband to jail. Does the cop then say, "Hey, maybe you should call these people," and hand them a phone number, or like how does that work?
when you're a victim, most law enforcement agencies hand you a card. Every agency has a different version of it. On the card, it lists your rights as a crime victim. Then on the other page, the back or whatever, it lists area resources. So in theory, victims should be given that when they reach out to law enforcement and a report is made.
Right on.
And they should know what's on the other side of the card. Someone's got
Correct.
to tell them,
Yeah.
okay,
Right, right. Hey,
these
flip
people
that
can
over.
help you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got a question for you, Andy. So obviously, like the whole Crime Stoppers organization has grown and changed and evolved over the years. What's in the future for it as you guys continue to grow? I mean, like, are there lessons that are still being learned and new plans and new laws working on being written? Like, what's the future here?
I just spent several months back and forth to the Capitol crafting legislation. This past legislative session has been the most successful one I've had in 30 years.
Wow.
I got at least 7 bills passed that enhances public safety and victims' rights. So every legislative session, there's always something that we're pursuing because something will come up. So we just don't know at a given time. So I'll give you an example. A bill that became a very national news story was 11-year-old Audrey Cunningham. She was kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and murdered, and she was found in a Trinity River with a brick in the water. Person that was eventually charged had a lengthy rap sheet, 2 miles long. One time he was charged with indecency with a child, and they pled it down to enticing a child. He pled guilty. Because it was pled down meant that he didn't have to register as a sex offender. So no one in the community knew that Don McDougal was a sex offender.
Wow.
And Audrey's family reached out to me, and I said, this was just a year ago. And I said, all right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to do some little background. I'm going to reach out to legislators, and Audrey Cunningham will be a catalyst for change. And we drafted a law. We actually called it Audrey's Law. And so the bill, which was signed by the governor a few days ago, states anyone who's convicted of any offense involving child grooming will now have to register as a sex offender.
Yeah.
So I told that family I was going to make this happen. Just hop on with, they don't know how to do this stuff. I said, this is what I'm going to do. And a family came up and testified. They'd never done that in their life. Of course, most people don't. But I got them up there and testifying. When I was testifying, I remember saying something like this, and it caught on with a lot of the media. I said, there just seems to be a continuous pattern of naming laws after dead kids. That's the reality that we're in right now. But Audrey Cunningham will be a catalyst for change.
Well,
and she's going to make it. Yeah.
I was going to say, it's just a great example of something that it seems like most people would assume that that's common sense and already exists, right? If you're grooming a child, if you're a predator who's been enticing a kid and you get busted for that, most of us would just assume, without looking at the actual legislation, oh, that guy's going to be registered, he's in the system. But no, the system's actually riddled with loopholes like that, where people you would think would be on everybody's radar are not, right? For weird little technicalities. So that work is so important. Yep. And that's state by state too. I mean, like every state has different laws about this stuff. Yep. They're all different from one another for the most part. It's a lot of work to do. It's a ton.
Those little things, those little degrees are how people negotiate. That's how defense attorneys and prosecutors do their jobs and keep the system moving, because there's so many cases. So it's like, they're coming up with these solutions using these laws, and as Sean said, the general public thinks like you're a sex offender. That's it. There's like one rule and you broke it. And that's, they don't know that there's, 800 statutes, with varying degrees of severity to them. Right.
And that's where I come in. People like me, because I know how to navigate that world. And I saw that was a wrong, and we're going to fix the wrong. And we did.
It's amazing.
That's great work. Obviously, that's great work. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other examples just like it that you and the people that work with you are responsible for and working towards. So yeah, kudos. I mean, that's exactly why I think we wanted to sort of talk to you and get some of this stuff out in the open, because it's such an interesting part of the whole justice system and world of crime. And I think a lot of people don't understand just how much hard work is being done.
I'll tell you another project that we're doing at Crime Stoppers. And again, it's precedent setting because no one's doing this. And we are actually recording victims' videos for prospective parole board hearings down the road. And again, the reason we started doing this is actually going back to the other case I was telling you about earlier that took 21 years to bring that person to justice after he was on a run. So the perpetrator was convicted in 2017, and he was sentenced to 60 years for both murders. He's parole eligible in like 20. David and Debbie Schwartz aren't going to be around. That's reality.
Andy,
Okay?
hang on. You froze up. He's parole eligible when?
Parole eligible in 2045. Okay? Because that's the time you have to go back when the crime took place. If he did it now, we wouldn't be talking. So he's eligible, so he was convicted in 17, so almost 30 years would go by before he's eligible. The Schwartzes aren't going to be around. Now, I already booked my appointment, so I'm taken care of. So I thought, how do we preserve their voice? How do we make sure when the perpetrator comes up for parole that the family has a message for the parole board? And we came up with this novel concept. We're going to record families, and we're going to work out an arrangement with the parole board where the video will be placed in the file to be used whenever the person comes up for parole.
Mm.
We've done 54 videos.
Wow.
For families.
Awesome.
We've used them multiple times.
That's great.
I love this project. I really love this project. And I'm hoping that other entities will adopt this project because none of us are guaranteed anything.
And are you allowed to bring that in to the parole hearing, even if those people are still alive, but they can't make it down there or whatever?
Each state has different ways of handling. So in Texas, parole hearings are, first of all, they're not public. Okay. Second of all, the hearing in Texas basically is if the family requests to meet with the parole board, they can. And so the offender is not there. Okay. It's kind of like we're just talking right now. It's kind of what it is. I just came from one on May 20th. We drove up to Austin, met with the parole board, and told the parole board members why we didn't think this person should be released. And so we do all that as well. So the video can be used if the person can't make it. There's a lot of travel that's involved. People just can't travel hours and hours to meet, so there's health reasons, things of that one. So this way, at least your voice is preserved in, the God forbid that I can't attend one in person.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, it's just one of these things that seems so common sense. And of course, why hasn't this been done forever, right? It's such a great idea. And when you say it, it's obvious, but it's also new for some reason. But yeah, right. I love it.
Right. The technology's been there for a long time. Like there's no reason.
It could have played. No,
we actually got a grant to do this. Wow. We were given a specific grant. We do 15 a year, and we have a professional crew that films it. I'm the one that does the interview. Which is good because people are comfortable with me. You don't see me in the footage at all. You don't even hear me, which is how it should be.
Sure.
But I'm the one that's asking the questions, and I know what questions that need to be asked because I know what the parole board is looking for.
Yeah. You're producing it.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. You're doing what we do. When we're making a TV show,
much higher stakes,
but for a much more noble cause, I would say. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, you're doing great work, Andy. It's an honor and a pleasure to talk to you about this stuff. Honestly,
yeah. Thank you for taking time to sit with us and kind of explain what you do and everything. And if something comes up again, I'd love to invite you back. You just a fun guy to talk to.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if you ever want to have fun, just Google me with the word murderabilia.
Oh boy.
Murderabilia. I'm going to leave you with that tease.
Okay. We're going to have to
look that up. I made up because I found this burgeoning industry online that was selling personalized items from serial killers.
Oh, I have heard about this.
Good.
Yes. I have heard about this.
Wow. But to be clear, you're not the one selling them.
No. He's trying.
I'm the one that discovered this industry, and I was like, "Wait a second, you can't be making money," And then it all started from that. And in my office, I have a suitcase filled with items that I've procured, that I've bought, that are mostly serial killers and stuff like that. So if you want to have a fun, fascinating show,
That might
We'll
be.
do that one.
Because there's a lot of famous people who are interested in this stuff. You musicians,
there are.
and artists, and I saw a report about this, and maybe you were even in it. That's really interesting.
Well, it's like the John Wayne Gacy paintings and the Charles Manson music, and like,
Yep.
yeah, there's
I
a lot
have
of
a
that
piece
stuff
of
out there.
Gacy shirt.
Oh man. Oh boy. Well, you hear that, everybody? Stay tuned for part 2, where we go to
That's the tease
Museum
right
of
there.
Haunted Items.
Murderabilia.
Murderabilia. That's the word it caught on. Became catchy, and so that's my claim to fame.
Well, hey, Andy, where can people go? Like, what, you already gave it once, but let's give it one more time. What's the Crime Stoppers number and the Crime Stoppers website? Like, if people are watching this and they're like, maybe on the fence about something and they want to come forward, where would you like them to go?
Its best way is to via email, and my email is very simple. It's akahan at crime-stoppers.org.
Perfect. Fantastic. Well, Myles, do you have anything else you wanted to ask Andy before we cut him loose back into the wild?
Okay, I'm gonna leave you with this great saying. You guys, you've seen the movie Gladiator, not the original, not the remake,
Yes,
but the
of course,
original
yes.
movie.
Yes,
Okay,
multiple times. Once
when
a
I
year at
do my
least.
presentations, I end with this. You remember the scene where Maximus is exhorting his troops in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, "What we do in life echoes in eternity," and that's what I do as a victim advocate.
I love that. I love that. That's right on. And also bonus points for any way to bring Gladiator into
Yeah,
something. Love that movie.
the original. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, hey, Andy, it was a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. Thank you for coming on. That was really nice.
You bet.
Yeah, thanks for doing what you
I'll
do.
let Bob and Rosemary know we met up.
Okay.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks,
Well, we'll
Andy.
stay in touch.
All
Thank
right,
you.
peace out. You bet.
Bye.